Yes, great. It's raining in Rutland and raining in Bournemouth too. Oh my goodness. Just drizzling in North London. Oh. I feel like sometimes it's quite different weather in North and South London. Maybe that's just my theory though. Okay, right. Welcome everybody. I think we are all sorted with our tech gremlins now. So today we are going to be talking about 5 powerful steps to create a strategy for growth. This is a subject that is very dear to my heart. I spent a lot of my career working on sales strategies for everybody from pre-startup all the way up to departments worth £400 million. And I think what is really interesting about this process is that it is basically the same. What I'm going to share with you now is really not that dissimilar to what I would have been doing working for these big retailers. It's not really that different at all. So first things first, for those who don't know me, my name is Catherine Eardley. I'm a retail and small business expert. I run the Resilient Retail Club, which is my membership group. It's fabulous, even if I say so myself, and I know we have lots of fabulous members here today as well. I'm also a Forbes contributor. I'm the subject of Starting Scaling Product Business, a judge for the Good Retail Awards and for Gift of the Year. And I also am a Small Business Britain champion, which means I do lots of events with them, all about small businesses. And that's really what I'm passionate about. Basically, in a nutshell, it was funny, I was reading something about your why this week, what is your why? And I guess really in a nutshell, I spent 17 years working for big retailers. It's pretty toxic. I know a lot of people, some people will have worked in big retailers, can back me up on this. It's not the nicest environment. And I think for me, what I'm passionate about is helping small product businesses do retail, but do it better, basically. So most people who start product businesses, they're very purpose-led, they believe in what they're doing, and I absolutely love that, support that. And what I want for you is basically to make enough money, which is not as easy as it may first seem in a product business, which many of you may have been experiencing. And so my mission is to share all of my knowledge and things that I've learned from all these years, 23 years in the retail industry now, with you to help you run your business better. So without further ado, what we're going to cover today is we're going to talk about what strategy is, why we need one. We're going to go through the 5 steps, and then we are going to look at putting it all together and how do you work on it going forward. We are going to have a few exercises, just a few points in the talk where I'm going to stop talking for a few minutes and give you a few minutes to think about your business. So you should have a really good sense of where to get started at the end of this. It's a little bit tricky. Originally, when I first did this, I wanted you to almost walk away with your sales strategy. But I think, to be honest, you really need to dig into the detail, which is what I'm going to share more of as we go along. And therefore, I think it's good that we go through the process. You have a bit of time to think about what you want to do and how you're going to get this information, and then you can take it away. The other thing that you're going to get by the end of the day, as I'm just finishing proofreading it, is a weekly planner. So this is going to be basically the steps that we've got here broken down into manageable chunks. So if you still feeling overwhelmed at the end of this and you think, I don't know where to get started, you're literally going to have a PDF that you can download and go through those steps as well. So that, as I said, will be coming at the end of the day. I'm going to talk until about 11:15, and then we're going to have about 15 minutes at the end for questions. So if you've got questions, feel free to pop them. Do I want them in the chat now? Because I'll have to scroll back for them. Maybe if you can just make a note of them and ask them at the end, that would be really useful. Because it's just me in here today and I'm manning the chat as well as doing the talk. So it's going to be easier for me if maybe you ask them at the end, but I will go through questions at the end. Does that sound good? Excellent. Okay, so first things first, what is a strategy? A strategy is a really funny word because some people just find it like a real nothing word. Some people don't like it. Some people just find it, as I said, one of those words that people say and doesn't really mean anything. But actually, if you look at what the dictionary definition of a strategy is, it is defined as a series of steps to work through to get to a desired outcome. And that's all it is, really. So it is working out what you want to do and working out how you want to do it. The benefits of having a strategy is that it helps you stay focused, and it can really help you cut through the overwhelm, because everything that you say yes to in a strategy, or everything you say no to, it helps you understand what you're saying yes to, and vice versa. So everything that you decide to focus on, you just have to put the other things aside. Try not to get distracted by shiny new tactic syndrome, you know, so all of a sudden you realize somebody else is doing this, that, and the other, and maybe you should be doing it too. If you've got a sales strategy, you can be confident saying, not for now, right now, I know what I'm doing. And you can always revise it. It's never a no forever. It's just a no for now. You know, it just really helps you cut through that overwhelm and stay focused. And we've only got a certain amount of time. Certainly a certain amount of time, and definitely only a certain amount of money. So having a strategy helps you understand where you do definitely want to focus things in on. Also gives us a clear target. So for example, if you start putting numbers against your strategy, which we'll talk about later, then you can aim directly for it. And we are very much target driven. And then the other thing about strategy, and one of the great things about the strategy process, is that it's what you call an iterative process. So you do it once, you do it again, you go over it again, you test and learn, you tweak the framework. But if you don't have a framework to start off with, it's very hard to tweak and test and change things as you go along. So all in all, a strategy is it's a mind focusing exercise and nothing else. And I also think it's really important because it can help you if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling demotivated. It's a great process. Really what I'm teaching you today is a process that you can use over and over again. And you can use it when things are going well and you want to make adjustments and understand how to keep things going well. And it can work really well when things aren't going so well, because again, it's just the same process over and over again. What's happening? What am I going to do about it? And how do I put those steps together? So the first step, so we're going to go through 5 steps. The first step to having a strategy is to get scientific. So what that means is, why is it going backwards? Okay. Taking the blame away. This is a particularly an issue for small businesses. I have to say, this is something that a lot of people that I work with really struggle with. This is not the time to doubt yourself. And I think if you get nothing else from today, if you can understand that the best way to create a strategy for your business is to try and be as objective as possible, and to shift into the scientific mindset, it's probably one of the things that makes the biggest differences to people I work with who are really struggling with self-doubt, low self-esteem, lack of motivation because they're worried they're not doing the right thing. Actually putting together a strategy is one of the most effective ways of getting them out of that funk, for want of a better word. It really plays into what I over the last few weeks I've been working on this theory about retailer mindset. So small business mindset, your mindset is, unfortunately, I say unfortunately because it's not the easiest thing to control. Unfortunately, it is probably has one of the most biggest impacts on your business. So it's definitely worth working on. And I identify the ideal retailer mindset by the acronym CROP. So CROP stands for curious, resilient, objective, and positive. So curiosity, I think, is actually a really underrated value, or it's really underrated for small businesses. And curiosity is about trying to work out why. So for example, let's say you launch a product and nobody buys it, right? So there's 2 ways you can look at that. You can either be like, oh my goodness, I'm just dreadful, I just really messed up. Or you can get curious. Okay, well, why didn't it sell? What didn't work? What could I do differently next time? And it was really interesting. And I shared this on the private members podcast this week, but I met a guy last week who sells this invention he created called the Rocket, and it goes onto the handle of a pushchair, and it vibrates and it actually rocks this pushchair. So your baby, you know, anyone who's had babies will know that when you're pushing them, they're moving, they sleep, and then as soon as you stop, they wake up, which is really infuriating, especially if you had big plans, things you wanted to get done. And so he created this device that basically carried on making it vibrate even when it wasn't moving. And the first time he launched it, he went to this big consumer show and he sold 4. And I think this is a really great example of curiosity. The next thing they did was then try and work out why did it only sell for? What was wrong? You know, how were they talking to people about it? How was the price point? All of these things. So curiosity, I think, is really important. Resilience is really about keeping going even when things are tough, being objective, and that's what this scientific mode really is all about, and being positive as well. So kind of, as I said, putting that blame aside, not deciding that the answer is that you're just dreadful, but actually being really clear that there are lessons to be learned and things to be done. So if you can stay in that CROP mindset, curious, resilient, objective, positive, that's really the first step to making a sales strategy. Because if you decide that the answer is that everyone's just, you know, that everything you're doing is dreadful, or actually, you know, even saying like nobody's buying anymore, and you know, cost of living crisis means that people just aren't buying anything, then, you know, you're not going to put together a very compelling strategy, because you're just going to assume it's all out of your control. Whereas if you have this mindset, this being curious, resilient, objective and positive, then you're much more likely to look at what you can control. And really, this also is about knowing your numbers. And if you have not started yet, this is where it's slightly tricky. If anyone's watching this, that they're totally not, you're totally brand new to this, there are going to have to be some things that you make assumptions about. But anybody else who has been trading, even for a short period of time, this is where you really get into the details. And here are some of the things that you need to know. You want to know how you're selling by product. So that means for any time period that you want to look at, like the last 3 months, for example, or the last year, excuse me, I'm a bit croaky today. You want to really understand the sales by product. You want to, this is really, really important, because this will really help you hone in on what your customers actually want. So understand your sales by line and look at it over an extended period of time, preferably I'd say about 12 weeks. If you've got very different sales patterns, you know that they're very different over Christmas, I would look at the fourth quarter by itself. But actually, you know, looking at it by quarters is very beneficial. So you might look at your fourth quarter, you might look at your first quarter, and you just really want to understand what is working. I would definitely suggest you run an 80-20 analysis, which is basically working out which of your products are generating 80% of your sales. So if you made sales of £100 in the first quarter, work out which of your products made up £80 of that 100. Because that will be really insightful. That would be very helpful for you to understand. Sales by channel, you want to know exactly where you're selling. If you sell in multiple places, have a look at how those different places are performing. If you are selling online, which the majority of you will be, even if you've got other sales channels as well, make sure you understand where your traffic is coming from. That will either be available to you from your website provider or through Google Analytics, which is a free tool. Have a look at your conversion rates, understand which products are converting well versus which ones get lots of views but not as many conversions. And then once you've got your 80-20 analysis as well, that helps you understand where your unproductive stock is. So for example, the 20% of sales coming from 80% of your products, how much stock have you got there? So the first things first, if you're working on a sales strategy, is to spend a good chunk of time looking at your numbers and really understanding the data and zooming it out as well. We often see our sales on a daily, hourly, every minute basis. We hear the ping or the cha-ching, and so we feel like we're really on top of what's happening, or you're dispatching the goods yourselves, but actually that's almost like you're too close. It's like the magic eye pictures, remember those from the 80s and 90s? Like, you're just too close to it. You have to step back for the picture to emerge. So first things first, when you're working on a strategy, you've got to get really comfortable with your numbers. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes. I'm going to stop talking, and I'm just going to ask you to think about, you know, where are you going to get this information from? What will be easy for you to get, and what may need some work to get your hands on? I'll put the slide back so you can see what I'm talking about in terms of the numbers. Okay, 3 minutes. Excellent. Okay, so yeah, as I said, you obviously some of this stuff you're going to have to dig into, but it's good good just to start thinking about the numbers that you need to look at and where you're actually going to find them. Yeah, it may be a combination. Yeah, so for example, Mita was saying she's going to use a mixture of Shopify and Google Analytics. You may be able to get some from your web provider. You may be able to have to get some from Google Analytics. I have to say, I'm going to be honest here, I'm not the biggest fan of the new Google Analytics. I somehow find it a bit harder to work with, but so if you are on the old version, I'd stay on it for as long as possible. I mean, the new version is obviously it's still free and it's still it's just maybe I'm just finding it a difficult transition. Yes. Yeah, I think I can get everything from my website, Zoe. That's good. Okay, so the second step, once you've got into this deep dive, and as I said, put on your scientific goggles, if you like. So taking just taking that sort of emotion out of it as much as possible. And I know it's hard because, of course, our small businesses, it is a very emotive subject. But when it comes to setting a sales strategy, it really has to be as much as possible about the numbers and about what your customers are telling you, for example. And I think the other thing that's really important, I always remember this, somebody said, you know, don't let your emotions make what should be a factual decision, which is an interesting one. I mean, something we could debate another time, but I think that it is true. You have to just try and make sure that you've got accurate information as well, because I also think one of the things that happens a lot with small businesses is that when they actually look at their numbers, things are maybe not quite as they thought, or they see things that they didn't see before. So something that they thought was not great, actually, when you add up all of its sales over a certain time period, it's doing really well. So it's definitely worth taking that time to look at it. The next thing then is to identify your green shoots. So your green shoots are what did best. So even when things are slow, now this is, I really can't stress this enough. If you're thinking there are no green shoots, there are, even if you sell 3 things and it's 2 of one thing and 1 of another, then you're still seeing something from that one that did better, if that makes sense. And that's why it's good to look at it across 12 weeks, because if you look at it from one day or even a week, to be honest, you're not going to necessarily see those patterns, and you're not going to be able to really hone in and identify which ones are doing best. So are there bestsellers? If you've got lots of single items, so for example, if you sell vintage, so maybe you can't say, oh, well, that thing sold loads. Can you look at your categories? So is it necklaces did really well, or of what you had, what was driving the most? If you've got multiple sales channels, which ones were generating the most money? What are your highest converting products and pages? So when you actually look at your website, where you actually seeing the highest conversion rate, but lots of the websites will let you see that by product. So you can understand, even if your overall website conversion is, 1%, are there some products that convert higher than that? Where are your most effective sources of traffic coming from? So for example, you may be spending loads of time on Instagram, but actually it's your emails that are driving sales. Even if all of it is underperforming to what you think it should be, then there's still going to be some things that are better than others. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the green shoots. We're looking for the things that are outperforming the other things that you're doing, so to give you ideas and ways to move forward. Customers, this is another really important one. You may feel like nobody's buying from you, but there are people buying from you. And I bet you any money that there are some people who are buying a lot from you, or more from you than the average. So those are the ones that you really want to hone in on. If you have literally not started yet, then this, of course, is harder to do, but then the next step that we're going to talk about is going to become even more important. But even if you've got a small amount of data, just a really small amount, or everything's not as you would like it to be, still look for what's doing best, because that is showing you, that is the customer showing you what they want, where the most effective places for you to be putting your time and attention. So price points is another one. For example, even if you sell multiple products and they're all different, but you notice that everything that's £25 and under is doing really well, that's really important information for you to know. Why is it important to track your top sellers? Well, we talked about top sellers a little bit last time, but I really can't stress this enough, because this is helping you understand what your customer wants. It's helping you identify areas where you can expand the range. So for example, let's say you sell slogan products and you sell slogan t-shirts, and you've got 5 slogans and one slogan is selling better than the others. Now, if you want to multiply that out, if you want to expand into different product ranges, the most obvious thing to do then is to take the slogan that's selling the best and put that onto a different product. Or equally, if you sell something, you've got something, multiple different products with the same slogan on, you know, which of those products is selling the best, and could you do more of those? So often I feel like all of retail can be summed up by saying do more of what works and do less of what doesn't. So, and knowing your best sellers is a really, really important part of that. It helps you inform your future buying decisions. It helps you to identify your unproductive stock. So yes, knowing which is the most effective sales channel, ways of driving traffic, that's all really important too. But being really close to your product and understanding what's working, that is also really super important when it comes to creating your sales strategy. And I think you have to go beyond just looking at it. I would say you need to create theories. So I call it theories because we used to do this all the time in big retailers. We would spend hours doing this. And the truth is that, you know, we didn't always know why the customer liked something the best, but we would be looking for feedback. We would be looking for information. We would be looking for patterns, for similarities between our best sellers. And we would really be asking ourselves why these products are the most popular. Or if we had marketing activity that worked, that was driving the most sales, why do we think that's working? So asking yourself these questions, it's as necessary as running the numbers, because let's say you run the I say to you, right, you need to know your best sellers, and you run you run the report and you look at your best sellers and you go, okay, let's see, you know, I sell mugs and mugs are the best sellers, you know, well, okay, that's great, that's useful. And of course, it helps you make decisions about things like how can you expand out your range. Of course, you could do more mugs. But I think it's also really, really important to think about why that might be. And as I said, you don't always know, but you can start creating theories which you can then test later on. So you could think to yourself, okay, well, why do people like the mugs? Is it the price point? Is it the fact it's an easy gifting item? Is it the fact that we offer a really unusual color range that most people can't get in other places? You know, what is it about these products that people are responding to? Because that again will really help you shape decisions that you make going forward. So for example, let's say you came up with a theory that the people loved the mugs because they were £15 and that was a really great price point for you. Then you could start experimenting with the things around, right, shall I try a few more £15 price point items? So it's really about like the green shoots, what's working, and then looking at what that means, or you know, why you think that is. You know, for example, when I worked in clothing, we used to find that we eventually came to this conclusion that if you couldn't look at an item of clothing, a dress, for example, and know exactly where someone's going to wear it to, you know, because believe it or not, there are things that are kind of a bit too casual for a dressy occasion and a bit too dressed up for a daytime occasion. And if you created something like that, then we knew then that was not going to sell. And we had backed it up with talking to customers as well. But it then meant that going forward, we could be really clear about, well, actually, I think that falls into that category of the kind of not really neither fish nor fowl, as they say, you know, like it's not one thing or the other. So run the numbers and then ask yourself why, what you think what your theories are. So again, I'm going to stop talking for a couple of minutes and just start with the good stuff, right? What's been working well? What has been working well for you? And obviously, we don't have time in this session to dig into all your data, but, you know, where do you think your green shoots are? Have a think about that. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see what your impression is versus what actually happens when you run the data. I'm just going to say there's a bit of chat about conversion rate bit of conversation about conversion rate in the chat. So it's worth just saying then, so your conversion rate is the number of sales divided by the number of visitors. That can work for both online or in a physical space. In the online space, 2% is actually considered good. So that means if 100 people visit your site and 2 people buy, then that is a 2% conversion rate. And in a physical space, then it's about 30 to 50%. Probably even higher in something like hospitality, because most people don't walk into a coffee shop, for example, without buying. But for sure, when you are talking about, a physical shop, for example, 30 to 50% is more common. Okay. And then we've got some questions here about volume versus sales volume versus sales income, which is really interesting. So in other words, which is best? The units sold, so let's say you sell cards, which is a high unit sales but maybe low value, versus as if you sell high, you've got value, maybe you only sell 6 or something, but they're really high value. I'd say ideally, if you've got products that have a really big broad spectrum, I would look at both. The reason for that is the unit sales will be telling you what the customer wants to buy most frequently. So that's a really good understanding of what they're coming to you for most often. Whereas sales volume is useful because, let's face it, we don't we don't pay our bills in units. So sales volumes is important because it's helping you understand, and to be honest, profitability, what the great one to be able to get to, which is takes a bit of extra work, is understanding which of your best sellers are the most profitable, because they can be different as well, especially if some of your best-selling items are not great margin. So that's another way of looking at it. But I would say, if possible, to look at both. As I said, the high unit sellers, I think they're important, as I said, because that's bringing people to you. That's transactions. That's footfall through the door or onto the website. But ultimately, money is also very important. Okay, step 3: speak to your customers. So this is slightly off. This is really to do with if you've created these theories that we talked about last time. I think it's really important to test these theories, if at all possible, to actually have conversations with people, because as much as it's really good to put these theories together, I think it is really important to test this with your ideal customers. I also think as well, if you're at the point, if you're watching this and you're like, oh, Catherine, this is all fine and dandy, but either I don't have any sales yet, or I just feel like there's no green shoots. Nothing is performing to where I want it to perform, or even close, then I think you have to go back and talk to your customers. It's really interesting. I've been doing this mini series of podcasts, and the first one came out last week, but I'm doing 4 of them in a row. And it's all about building your business on a budget. But so everyone I'm talking to has grown their business significantly through organic means. And I'd say the one thing that they all have in common is the amount of time they spend talking to their customers. And I definitely think that if at any point you're getting stuck, confused, don't know which way to go, I'm not sure which direction to take, I think you have to go back and talk to your customers. And it's one of those things that if you can kind of arrange this, if in an ideal world, if you're doing let's say you're doing your sales strategy every quarter, you'd run your numbers and then you try and get some customer feedback sorted out roughly at the same time, so you can kind of talk to them about what's going on, just what works, what's working for them right now. What do they love about what you do? This is a really interesting point. It's useful to understand. And so when I talk about your customers, there's different options. Ideally, you want to talk to your best customers, right? Because most businesses, or actually all businesses I think that I've ever worked with, they had a core of customers who were just really loyal and loved the brand. And I think it's really, really useful to talk to those people, because ultimately what you want to do is you want more of those people, right? You want more of your best customers. I talk quite a lot about creating true fans for your business. These are your true fans, and true fans are great because they spend more money, they complain less, they promote you for free to other people because they talk all about how much you, how great you are. They return fewer items. They're just generally better, lovelier customers to have. They're more likely to share photos on social media of them using your products. So definitely talk to them, understand what do they love about what you do, because that can also really help you with putting out there to, talking to other potential customers. This is possibly one of the most important steps of the whole process, and it's probably the one I think that small businesses do the least, as a very general rule. And I understand why, because it's hard, it's time consuming, it's a lot of people aren't confident about what to say. But I think where you have to start from is you need to understand as much as possible about your customer. What are their frustrations? What do they think about your product? I don't know if anyone heard the podcast this week with Laura from Otto and Ivy, who makes specialist shoes for people with size 8 feet and above. And, she spent a long time going over the prototypes with her best customers and making adjustments. And every time she had a product launch, she would get feedback from the customers. If you absolutely can't talk to them, then definitely make sure you're looking at their buying patterns. So what do your best customers buy? When do they buy? Where are they coming from? Is it that when you send them an email? But the best way of doing this is to talk to them, is to actually, have a conversation, and just, the thing is that people love being asked their opinion. So I do think often you have to go with a bit of bribery, like offer them a £25 voucher if you can have a call with them, or, offer them if you can meet them in person, have a cup of tea or coffee. But I think that the thing is that it's really, really important to know your numbers. It's really important to start creating these theories for yourself about why people are buying, but then it's also really important to talk to your customer. And I have to say that I often say, the best sales strategy is a great product, because now I've been told off for saying that great products sell themselves, and I appreciate why, because it's still a lot of effort to sell them. But everything that you do, the better your product is, and by better I mean the closer aligned to what your customers need, then I would, then the better it will sell. The more likely people will recommend it, the more likely people come back and buy again. And so you've got to just keep trying to hone in on what your customer wants. And this is the real beauty of being a small business, right? If you are a buyer for John Lewis, you've got to buy products that work for a pretty broad range of people, which is, I think, probably one of the reasons why a lot of big retailers are struggling right now, because they have to create products that sort of, kind of appeal to lots of people. You don't have to do that. You have to create products that appeal to potentially a really niche audience. Most small businesses, if they had 1,000 true fans, they would be able to be very, have a very successful small business, possibly even tipping you into the kind of medium-sized business, right? If they're buying from you frequently. So you don't have to create things for everybody. You have to create products for your best customers. And if you don't know who your customers are, even more reason to talk to the people who you think might be your ideal customers, so you can start putting together some, a theory. So you can start honing it, because nothing will teach you who your ideal customer is like actually talking to real people. So I'm going to stop talking for 3 minutes. And I'd like you to think about who you're going to talk to, how will you incentivize them, how will you get access to them? Can you ask people, if you've got a physical store, do people come in? Can you just ask them, hey, do you want to come to, have coffee with me one day next week? I'm doing some research. As I said, generally speaking, this is not a hard ask of people, because people love giving their opinion, especially if they're being compensated for it in some way, either monetarily or with cake. The other thing, there's a book called, I think it's called The Mum Test, or the Mum Question, something like that, MOM, which is all about basically how do you talk to people? Because the thing is that if you say to someone, do you like my product? Do you like my glass? Looking for props, do you like my glass? Most people will be like, yeah, I love it, but you want to be able to kind of dig in a bit deeper, find out, what are they buying right now? What are they thinking about right now? What do they love about what they bought from you last time? What do they want to see more of? What are they frustrated about, for example? So there's lots of different questions that you can ask them. But really, I think that if you did this every quarter, then that would mean 4 times a year you're checking in with the most important people in your business, which to me seems like a reasonable amount. And I think that you'll actually get a lot of really valuable information from this. And again, it's even more important if you've not started yet, or if you are just at this point where you're like, nothing's working, or I've tried lots of different things and I just don't feel like I know how to go forward. If you don't know how to go forward, I would say stop and go talk to your customer. Just to bring up a couple of things that popped up in the chat. I feel like I always say this, I'm going to stop talking for 3 minutes, and I never last the full 3 minutes. But I think it's important distinction, actually. There's different ways of gathering information. There are, generally speaking, the smaller the ask, the more likely you are to get a response. So probably the lowest effort is putting a story up in our Instagram and saying, do you prefer this or that? And that can be really, really useful for getting input from a lot of people. And it's also, people like it because it's connection and it's making them feel like they're part of your journey, part of your brand. I think if at all possible to have that in-depth conversation as well, that could be something really, really powerful. But, again, that is much more time consuming. But I think, maybe a combination of both, maybe on an ongoing basis, asking people things, polls, which do you prefer, this, that, the other, and then also trying to get some time in to talk to people in a more in-depth way. Yes, email survey with a carrot discount code that works well. Perfect. Okay, so step 4. So this is really, so when we're talking about our sales strategy, what I encourage people to think about is the 4 different ways of growing your sales. So the 4 different ways of growing your sales are: number 1, get more people to come. Number 2, get more visitors to buy. In other words, improving your conversion rate. Number 3, persuading people to spend more. And number 4, getting people to come back more often. I think it's a useful way of looking at your sales because it helps you see the full breadth of all the different things that you could be doing in your business. And if anyone's done their plan, your sales challenge with me in January, you'll know this is the basis. I get people to do brainstorming. I actually get you to come up with 25 ideas broken down across these 4 categories, which I'm not going to ask you to do today. But the reason that I do that is because often when people talk about sales growth, they're very focused on number 1, getting more people to come, because that's what people think of. More traffic to the website, more visitors, more followers on social media. Whereas in fact, let's say you have the same number of people on your website, but you doubled your conversion rate. So now instead of 1 person buying, there's 2 people buying, then you've doubled your sales without any extra marketing. And equally, if every time somebody buys from you, let's say you manage to increase your average transaction value by 10% on every transaction, then that means your sales would go up 10% without any changes to your conversion rate or to the number of people coming to your website. The real magic happens when you start improving all of them, because if people buy more frequently, or people convert more frequently, and then their average transaction value starts going up, then collectively you start seeing your sales increase. So it's a good thing to be looking at. And certainly in big retailers, we would always be looking at a sales strategy that tied into all of these. So it wouldn't be like we'd just be focusing on getting more people to come. We'd be looking at it all the way through, effectively the buying journey, because this is about the steps people go through to become customers, repeat customers, and eventually, hopefully, super fans. So this is a good way to help generate ideas, especially if you're in the non-idea, the run out of ideas camp. You know, sometimes when you try and do a sales strategy, the problem is you've got so many ideas, you don't know how to hone them down. And sometimes it's like, actually, I'm just feeling a bit stuck. If you're feeling in that bit stuck camp, then hopefully looking at your data will give you some really good ideas. Hopefully talking to your customers will start giving you some really good ideas. And then this next piece is really about kind of scoring yourself, if you like. So, for example, from my book, Tame Your Tiger, one of the case studies is a lady called Irene who runs an illustration business. So she might, just to kind of give you a really quick idea of what this is like, what this might sound like, feel like. So she might say, number one, getting more people to come. Okay, I'm going to give myself 4 out of 5 here because I do loads of stuff. I run ads, I do PR. You know, I think my SEO is okay. I think there's more that could be done to it, but it's generally okay. But, you know, I feel like overall, I'm doing lots of different things that help get more people to come. And then number 2, getting more people to buy when they do come. So in conversion rate, she might say, do you know what? Actually, my conversion rate's amazing. It's 4%. I've done so much work on optimizing conversion rates. I'm going to say this is one which I definitely feel great about. Number 3, getting people to spend more every time they come. She might say, well, okay, I've not really done much of that. I haven't even done anything at all to see if I can improve average spend. So that is definitely an area for improvement. And then number 4, getting people to come back more often. Well, have I done much with loyalty, or our best customers not really know? Okay, so this is something that I can definitely look into. So it's just a question of kind of going through these different and just asking yourself, you know, how do I think I measure up? Where do I think the gaps are? Because then when we come to selecting what we're going to do for the sales strategy, you kind of have an idea of, it's a little bit like a SWOT analysis in a way. It's like looking at your strengths as a business owner and as a business, what you're currently doing. And don't use this as a stick to beat yourself with. If there's areas of improvement, that's actually really good, because in a way it's worse. If you're like, do you know what, I do everything I can possibly think of to get more people to come. I've done everything I can do for my conversion rate. I've done everything I can do to improve my average transaction value. And I've done everything I can do for my best customers. I'm completely out of ideas. In a way, that is a slightly harder place to be than if you're like, actually, I think I'm a 1 out of 5 on all of these. So I'll put this back so you can see the different ones. And then we'll just take 3 minutes for you to think about how you'd grade yourself. Okay. How did you find that? Was that okay? As I said, don't forget, if there's areas where you think actually this is really not, great, then that's great. It's an area of improvement. Okay, so step 5 is coming up with your plan of action. So now we have gone through, just to recap, we've gone through, done a deep dive into the data. So we've had a look at all of the different information that we can pull out of the business. We have started looking for green shoots. So we started looking at the best, what's happening, what that's telling us about our business. We started creating some theories about why we think that's working, started looking at things that we can do differently. We have also hopefully spoken to our customers in some way, some form, whether that's short form through social media, polls, quizzes, or whether it's longer form through focus groups or just phone calls, cups of coffee, WhatsApp voice notes, whatever works for people, with our customers. We've also gone through and done a bit of an audit for the 4 ways of growing our sales. It's also actually really interesting, I think. Let's say you do the audit now. Let's say you do this process. Let's assume that this sales strategy process is something that we're doing on a quarterly basis. Then you are going to be able to check next time, like, do you think you've moved the needle? Do you think you've improved your score on all of these different elements? So I definitely think that it's a good idea to, to go through these steps every time and to ask yourself, okay, actually, my conversion rate is still a pain. And there was a little bit of discussion in the chat about that, it can be a really long-term goal to improve your conversion rate. It can take quite a long time, and it can be something you have to do a lot of trial and error with. So you may still rank yourself the same, but you're like, actually, do you know what? I feel really good now about what I'm doing for my most loyal customers, and I've definitely seen an improvement in how often they come back and shop with me, for example. So it's definitely a really, really positive thing to do on a quarterly basis. And then once you've done that, hopefully what started to appear is a set of actions that make sense for you to use to build out your sales strategy. So as I said, effectively what we're doing here now is we're looking for the steps that you need to take to grow your sales. Now, the key thing to say about a sales strategy is that it's about picking something. It's about picking things that you're going to do to work on in your business. And that naturally means that you are going to have to not do other things. And I think it can feel really difficult to sort of put other things to the side. But I'd say you're much less likely to succeed if you're trying to do everything spread very, very thin than if you're really focusing on one thing. This is not a no forever, it's a no for now. It's about picking what you're going to focus on, putting everything to one side. And I remember I was listening to a podcast, and the person on the podcast said, one of the hardest things you have to accept as a business owner is that you could have got some sales from the things that you are now effectively turning your back on, but that's okay. You still have to focus in, you still have to pick your plan of action. And that is the power of the strategy. It's the focus, it's the picking, it's the what you leave to the side is actually what gives you the strength. And you can, we're talking about a process that you look at once a quarter. So once a quarter, you can assess whether you pick the right things. But the key thing now is actually pick what you're going to do. So how do you pick what you can do and how many things you're going to do? So I think the key for me is overwhelm is probably the biggest risk that I see. As I work with people a lot on strategy, it's one of the key things that I do, whether it's in strategy intensives or, for example, at the beginning of the year, I did a lot of business audits where people submitted a questionnaire and then I went through it with them and then we talked about a strategy for the year. And I have to say, I would rather that people commit to say 3 things for the whole year and get them done than say, right, I'm going to do all of these different things and, just be pulled in too many different directions. Overwhelm is one of the most dangerous, sounds dramatic, but it's probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks. So try and avoid overwhelm, try not to select too many things, and also elongate the time frame. So one of my favorite sayings, I'm sure those of you who follow me for a while have heard me say this a lot, We overestimate what we can do in a day, we underestimate what we can do in a year. When we're talking about strategy, we're going to have a mixture of quick fixes and long-term plans. But what you mustn't do is decide that all of the long-term things have to happen at the same time, because that is the quickest route to overwhelm. So where do you focus your time? Well, you want to pick things that, as you've been working on this process, you've been working on your data, you've been working on what your customers want. So you want to pick things that are aligned, that maybe some of it will come out of customer feedback. A lot of them will say, like, well, you know what, I really love this, but I wish you had I could get refills. So maybe that's something that you create a refill strategy, which will help people come back more often, but that's come from your customer focus. You may want to build on key strengths. So for example, this is an interesting one. Often we think as business owners, we have to only work to improve our our areas of weakness. But actually, if you're brilliant at, organic social media and it's driving loads of traffic and that traffic's converting to your website, then maybe you lean into that. Equally so, it could be that you go through the process of looking at the 4 different ways that you grow sales, and you identify, actually, I'm really strong in 3 areas, but I really think this 4th area is something that I've never explored. It's got untapped potential. So then that could be something you hone in on, an area of weakness. Ultimately, you want to try and work out where you're going to get the highest return. And this is a little bit trickier to do, but it's not impossible. For that, what I want you to do is every time you think about something, so let's say, now customer feedback's a little bit hard because you can't really put a number on that, but let's say you decide you want to improve your website conversion. So actually, if you could improve that by 20%, that would have a 20% uplift on your sales. That would be quite significant. So that would help you identify, okay, right, that could be an area to work on. If you decide that actually I want to launch Pinterest, for example, that might be something that you put a lot of time and effort into, but what do you think you're going to get out of it? So I would definitely encourage you, when you're thinking about strategy, actions that you're going to take for the strategy, that you would want to start putting numbers against them. Now, again, this is the way it works in big businesses. Every time we would come up with a strategy for something, whether it was a product strategy or, a customer initiative, there would always be a sale. We would have to put against it a sales number. This is what we think it's going to generate, and usually a profit number as well. This is how much we think this is going to add to the bottom line. We didn't know, like we used to do, okay, we're going to put, metallic gel pens on the till points in every store at Christmas, right? What's that going to generate? You would have to sit down and say, okay, what do we think? Every store sells 10 a day for 3 weeks. What does that look like? Like you just have to start from a point of it being logical. And this often trips people up because they're like, well, how am I going to know? How am I going to know how much a loyalty scheme is going to add? Okay, well, let's have a look. If you've got 40% of your sales come from returning customers, you might say, okay, what if my loyalty scheme generated 10% more sales? How much would that be? Okay, is that a big piece? Is that a small piece? Like, what does that feel like? So I definitely recommend that you go through and you try and just come up with a number. Like, what do you think that's going to do? So you're looking for not loads and loads of stuff, especially if we're talking about in the next quarter. You want to be looking at maybe 3-4 different things that you're going to be doing. Things that, if you say, right, actually, I want to upgrade my packaging. Okay, so what do you think that's going to add? I mean, sometimes it's hard because sometimes these things are intangible, but ultimately, do you want to expect that means that people will come back more often? Do you think you'll feel more confident pushing higher price point items if the packaging's more elevated? Like, what do you think this is going to do? And you may think, oh, do you know what? Actually, that feels like that's a nice to have, but right now my main focus is just got to drive some sales. All right, what if I did an email campaign or upgraded my email marketing? Okay, actually, I think if I doubled my email marketing, that would add a bigger chunk of money, for example. So to the best of your ability, you want to try and put money against it, and you want it in line with what you've learned from your customer, and then you want it to address either something you're really good at and working on that, or plug a gap in your 4 ways of growing your sales. So going back to Irene, just again to give you a bit of an example of how this would work. So let's say Irene's done this and she's gone through, and she's identified that, you know, I would always recommend doing it this way as well, your short term, medium term, long term. And then I put post Christmas, because there is definitely a point for all retail, all product businesses. Please, please, please don't plan really anything in the fourth quarter, unless you're definitely not a Christmas brand. Let's say you're a bridal brand and you know that your summer is your equivalent of Christmas. Don't plan anything for your peak period. Just leave it. Just leave it. That has got to be sales focused. So, you know, don't move your fulfillment center, launch a new website, change email marketing providers in the fourth quarter. So if you're kind of mapping this out and you're like, okay, well, I think I'm good up to September, almost like after that, everything goes into the 2024 bucket. I know this is March 2023 when I'm saying this, it sounds crazy, but you always want to elongate that time frame, and please don't set yourself up to fail by planning a major sort of big strategy chunk in the fourth quarter. But you may want to look at some quick wins, and maybe for Irene, this is all going to depend on, you know, your workload, what you've got going on right now. She's thinking, okay, in the next 3 months, all I can commit to is the customer feedback, so I've got other stuff going on. Medium term, I'm going to start a loyalty scheme, experiment with a bundle app. Longer term, actually, I feel like, yes, I'm fairly happy with the SEO, but I think that could be improved. So I'm going to hire an agency. I'm also going to do more PR. I'm happy with my PR where I'm pitching products, but I'd like to do more where I talk about my founder story. And then, you know, okay, actually, maybe the website's kind of getting a bit old, or I want to change platforms, or want to refresh my theme, or whatever. I'm going to put that in the post-Christmas bucket. So again, if you do this each quarter, then you can kind of assess, are you still happy with these? Have you done the things that were under your short term? Are you now ready to start working on the things that were on the medium term? Are you still happy with these, or do you want to tweak them? But if you've got the plan, you've got it set out. And to be honest, a lot of people I work with, they feel a huge sense of relief, because often people will look at these and be like, right, I need to do new website, SEO, PR, loyalty scheme, bundles. I want to do all of these things. And they almost decide that they have to do it right now. And then therefore they feel overwhelmed and nothing gets done. So doing it this way, you've got it slotted in, you've got it as a goal going forward, but it's not that it has to happen right now, because that's, I think, probably one of the things that really trips people up, is they just try and do everything all at the same time. Everything everywhere all at once, as they say. So I definitely think as well, if you can, when I know that those were sort of general headings like, you know, loyalty scheme, once you've set those kind of top line, I would suggest you set a SMART target. So SMART stands for specific, S specific, M measurable, A achievable, so yeah, R realistic, and T time bound. So specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time bound. And this will allow you to set specific timeframes, set your expected results, and then review these against your expectations. So for example, if we look at taking one of Irene's and making it a SMART target, instead of just saying get customer feedback, she's made it specific. So interview 10 customers. Measurable, that's pretty, you can measure that, you can say whether or not that's happened. Achievable, so she said by the end of May. Okay. Realistic and time bound, so by the end of May, so she knows what she needs to do, and then she can break it down further, you know, identify her best customers, create a questionnaire and interview format, schedule the calls, create summaries. So each one of those can be broken down even further. So for example, if you look at, say, like the loyalty scheme, then that as a SMART target would be saying create, launch the loyalty scheme to our best 30 customers by the end of June, for example. So again, making it really specific. And then once you've done that, you have got a sales strategy. So you have got you've got steps of what you want to do. You know what you're trying to achieve. You've taken the time to run through for your business and thought about what needs to happen. You put some numbers against it, especially when you're in that sort of assessment phase where you're trying to work through what it is that you want to do. Yeah, that gives you a framework for you to then be able to assess it against. And if you're doing this every quarter, you can pull it out at the end of the quarter and look back and say, right, what did I do? What were my goals? And how far did I get? Okay, so now 3 minutes. What did your time frame look like? So realistically, I want you to just think about things just before you, because you just have to be honest about your capacity. You know, several of us have got kids going on Easter holidays at the end of this week, for example. So April's a tricky month. We may have other time commitments. You may be away at certain times. You may have to say, right, this quarter, how much time do I have? You know, how many different things can I take on? So before you decide how much you can do, like, be realistic about what time and you know, what space you have available for the different elements, so that when you're creating your strategy, you're being, you know, it goes back to being realistic as part of the SMART targets. You know, you can say, I'm going to get all of this done, but actually be really realistic. Have a look at your time. So again, I'm going to stop talking for a couple of minutes and think about, when you get to the point of selecting the different tactics for your strategy, what you know, how many do you think you can take on? Some really good conversation in the chat. Madeline was saying that she's just looked at it and realized that she thought her large and small candles sold pretty evenly, but was completely wrong, and it's the large ones that drive most of the sales. So useful to know. This is the thing. We get impressions about things and sales and what's going on in our business, but actually sometimes when you look at the numbers, you realize that you just didn't get it right. I used to see this all the time when I worked in big retailers, you know, chains of hundreds of stores, and you'd speak to the store managers and they'd be like, oh, these are flying off the shelves, you can't keep these in stock, and then you'd run the numbers and be like, I think you sold 2, but you know, the perception is they saw 2 in a quick succession. They thought, oh, they must be selling really, really well. Mita was saying that she runs her business alongside her day job, and Madeline was saying she has 1 day a week. Right, so you know, if you've got 1 day a week for your business, or you run it alongside a day job, then this is actually really important part of the process, to actually look at realistically how much time you have got. I would also suggest that you block out something that I was introduced to recently called a discipline diary, where you go through the time that you actually have, and then you put in the day-to-day stuff as well. So, you know, how long are you spending creating social media content? How long are you spending packaging orders, doing customer service? Once you actually put those blocks of time in, how much time do you have to work on some of these bigger things? And if you're absolutely adamant they're going to make a difference, you know, how are you going to achieve that? Is there anything that you can do to outsource or create an additional pocket of time, or what are you going to do to get it done? But once you start looking at it like that, you may have to elongate it out to a year. You may have to say, I'm going to do these 3 things over a year. If that's what it takes, then that's what it takes. But the fact that you've identified what you believe to be the best things to do, and then you can move forward and focus on those, it can make a real big difference. Sally says, my assistant manager Jane always says this is flying out. And when I look at the actual sales, when we sold like 3 in a month, this has become such a standing joke. She's created a hashtag flying out. I love it. Isn't it? Honestly, it used to happen all the time. Or they'd say people are desperate for this. I get 10 inquiries a day about this product that we don't have. And then you'd say, all right, well, I'll send you some. And then you send them to them. They never sold them. But that's just the joys of retail. Keeps you on your toes. That's the joy and the frustration. It's never the same. There's always something new happening. Okay, so I put in a sneaky step 6 here, because after we did the 5 steps, I thought, well, actually, really, this is as I said, this is an iterative process. So you go through, you go through your 5 steps. So you look at the data, you identify your green routes, you talk to your customers, you do a bit of an analysis on your business to work out your gaps, you identify what you believe will be the biggest wins, and you put a plan together to achieve those biggest wins. And then really the 6th step is you just keep going around that. You look at it once a quarter. Okay, well, did I achieve this? Did I get everything done that I wanted to? Is it working? Is it doing what I thought? And, you know, I thought maybe a loyalty app might generate another £2,000 a year. Has it done that? Well, it's been running for 6 months and actually it's generated 4,000. Well, happy days. You know, so it's that process of going through and tweaking and looking at what you set as your short, medium, long-term goals, and you may change them. You know, you may get to the end of that first quarter and you're like, actually, I was super efficient. I got my short-term and my medium-term goals got done. So maybe I can move something forward from long-term. Or this has actually started working really well. Or now when I look at it this way, I can see that this sales channel is outperforming all the others. Okay, I'm going to put more focus on it there. So it's not a fixed thing that you do it once and then that's it, but it's a process that you keep going through over and over again. The more you do this process, the more you learn about your business. The more you learn about your business, the better decisions that you make, and so on and so forth. It's a real virtuous cycle, which is why I'm really passionate about it. And as I said, hopefully you can see now all of the uses, because if you are ever sitting there and you're just like, oh, it just all seems crazy and can't get a handle on what to do, or it's all just going a bit pear-shaped, you know, take some time, go do your strategy work somewhere else from where you normally do your day-to-day, go to a coffee shop for a couple of hours and pull the numbers. Remember that, curious, resilient, objective and positive. So keeping your mindset really like that, okay, what do I need to tweak here, as opposed to that everything's a disaster, everyone hates me. And I should say, I know that everyone feels like that, but I feel like most people feel like that at least some of the time. Is there an equation for which products to make versus revenue? So trade customers pay, sorry, I can't see. Versus retail, which is the other way around. Which products take, I'm not sure I understand the question. Maybe you could, I think you can unmute yourself actually. Let me just finish up and then we'll jump on to questions. Okay, so in summary, key takeaways. Number 1, get scientific. Number 2, find the green shoots. There will be some green shoots. If you really don't have any green shoots or you haven't started yet, then talking to your customer becomes even more important, but it's important for everybody, because you want to not just see the green shoots, but understand what they are and why. Rate yourself on the 4 different ways of growing sales. Create your plan of action, which has got to be realistic so you don't feel overwhelmed, and then use this plan of action to refine it over time. Review it once a quarter, go back and make any changes. Okay, and now we have any questions. Yeah, so feel free, we've got the chat. If you want to ask a question and you're feeling bold, you can unmute yourself. Which product? Okay, all right. So Host Coffee Roaster says, is there an equation for which products take to make versus revenue? Oh, what? Okay, so trade customers. Yeah, hi.
Hi. So,
Hello.
hello. So what it was is I've got kind of like two revenue streams. One, I can sell coffee to trade, obviously at
Yes,
a lot lower price,
got it, got it, got
but
it,
one conversation means a lot of coffee.
got it.
Whereas when I sell to retail, it's I'm selling like a bag
Yes,
to one person, but obviously I
yes,
can sell it, it's almost double the price. So
yes.
I have concentrated on trade, and I think I might have been a bit of a wally, and maybe I should have tried concentrating, or just maybe I don't know quite what to do about that split.
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting question. So basically, and this is a case where I would be looking at profits, and I'd probably be looking at almost profit per customer in this case, because you're right, with trade, you're selling at a much lower retail price. But as you said, one conversation could lead to an order for hundreds of pounds worth of coffee, which I would look at, okay, what's my average profit per customer for trade versus what's my average profit per customer for direct to consumer. I would say that most people the people who in a way have the most resilient businesses, a lot of the time they have both streams, and they probably are giving them, I don't know if quite equal weight, because it depends. Some people find the trade element really super easy, they love it, they much prefer that and find it much easier to get their head around than direct to consumer. Direct to consumer can also be a bit of a longer burn, so it takes longer to get traction, sales to your website, that kind of thing, but obviously has a much higher profit. So I don't think that necessarily you focusing on trade was the wrong decision, because if you look at you could be clearing a decent amount of profit for every order, even if your profit margin per item is much lower. It's why anybody sells to trade, because obviously it's way lower than selling it to your son directly. But I would just maybe think that, is this an opportunity to start, putting a bit more emphasis on the direct to consumer? Because in an ideal world, you'd kind of have both of them firing on all cylinders, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
And you're not a Wally. I mean, it's like I often I'm in a business mastermind, and sometimes we say to ourselves, like, what's your language? Because it's like, yeah, we're all working on the best assumption that we've got, really. Okay, do you have anything in the club increasing customer loyalty and increasing spend, says Ellie? I did do a talk, actually. It was before Christmas. Kate and I, the member assistant, did a talk on customer loyalty. And I also did a talk before Christmas about growing your average transaction value as well. So I will put this in the follow-up email to the members. But yes, there's definitely talks. If you go to any club members who are watching, if you go to live workshop replays, there was a talk I think they were both October, November last year. One was about customer loyalty and one was about increasing transaction value, but there are definitely workshops on that. Rachel says, would you consider a loyalty scheme for higher priced items? Ours range from 35 to 225. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. No problem, Mita. Thanks so much for coming. I think, in a way, I'd say even more so. I'm trying to think of an example, but I personally love a loyalty scheme because I love free stuff. But no, I guess what I should say is that there are certain brands that I buy from repeatedly, and especially, to be honest, if they're higher value, if sometimes you'll get like a little note, even just a note, to be honest, that says, thank you so much for being a repeat customer, thanks for shopping from me again. I love that. That's great. That's really nice. So I definitely think that loyalty schemes could definitely work for higher priced, and loyalty schemes can mean different things. There's the Tesco Club Card model of loyalty schemes, where it's literally you spend this and you get that, but it could be something as simple as, if someone buys from you 3 times, then you pop something extra in their parcel, or because sometimes they want points and sometimes people just want recognition. Sometimes people just want to know that you appreciate that they bought from you again. Love to add a loyalty scheme in for customers, something to get my thinking cap on. Yes, Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I said, there are definitely people who, there's a local shop to me that does loyalty, and I've certainly benefited from that because I shop there quite frequently, and I got like, quite a lot of money off a bag because I'd saved up all my loyalty points for like 3 years and this kind of thing. And that was brilliant. And I was really pleased about that. But I think often it's just about really making people know how much you appreciate them, because you probably really, really appreciate your ideal customers, not your ideal customers, your best customers, because they literally, pay the bills, right, for the business. So it's, do you feel like you're doing enough for them? Good to know. We can look at points versus presents. Yeah, I think you can be quite flexible. I've even seen people do things like, once you've ordered from someone 5 times, you get free shipping for life or things like that. And that's just like a really, really nice, people just really appreciate you telling them that thank you. Joe says, we've added a loyalty scheme in the sense of points. Each level they reach, they get a pin badge and a big discount code on a type of product. Yes. I mean, think about, I feel like this is sometimes what I call like the NatWest Pig, the theory of loyalty reward. Does anyone remember the NatWest Pigs? So they were these money banks, the piggy banks, China piggy banks. I mean, they're like spectacularly, if you see them now, you're like, whew, those are quite some lookers. But when I was a child, I did not have a NatWest account. I was so jealous of those piggy banks, and I think it was like the more money you put into the account, like you got one of these pigs, and some people get like the whole family and stuff. I love my NatWest Pigs. Had all the piggy banks. Yes. The song, the piggies are waiting. Right. Like, look at that. And what did you get? Like, I mean, as I said, it was a piggy bank, right? It wasn't like somebody, I think that's interesting. Shocked how much the bookmark. Wow, yeah, you've added a collectible bookmark that you receive with purchase, and you design every month with the month's calendar on. I've been shocked how much the bookmark has motivated sales on a monthly basis. Yeah, I love that. Absolutely. People, as I said, sometimes people want money off. Sometimes people want to feel like part of the inner circle. Sometimes people want to just feel really appreciated, and like, it's just a great way of saying thank you to your best customers. And the more people feel good about shopping with you, the more they're likely to come back. My husband still has his at his parents' house. I love it. We make the pin badges in-house, and the discount code motivates for another sale, so minimal cost, but our loyal customers really like collecting the pin badges. Sounds great. I'm sure I've done loads of irrational things in my life for the sake of getting something that was probably like super low value. I can't really, I'm going to have a think about it now, but I just know, I mean, because I'm a real sucker for this kind of thing. I'm totally like, yeah, love the idea of having exclusive pin badges. Like, it's so pleasing. Okay, my conversion rate is really good, but sales are slow. Is there anything other than working on SEO, growing email and socials audience that I can do? Am I missing anything? Love the pigs, have the whole family in the loft. I think that, I mean, in terms of getting more people to come, there's this theory as well that there's only three ways to build an audience, which is you can buy them, which is paid advertising, which is, tricky to do. Not impossible, but usually the thing that I suggest people do last. You can build it, which is all your content marketing, and you can borrow it. So I definitely do think that in terms of getting people to come, like thinking about how can you collaborate with other people in your area, which I believe you already do to an extent, right, Zoe? But, just almost like, if that works, if that's one of your green shoots, so let's say you did your analysis and you're like, oh, there was that one time that I did this, and I did this collaboration, it worked really well. Okay, well, that's a green shoot. So could you do 10 more of those, for example? I definitely think getting yourself in front of other people's audiences is really key. And I've probably said this before, but I was very gratified to see that Shopify, who do their Future of Commerce every year, they put collaborations in as one of their hot trends for 2023. And I was like, I think I've talked about this every year since 2018, but I still think it's valid. Who else has a relationship with your customer? The pig scared me, says Kathy. Yes. Going back to conversion rate, I've just realised, probably late to the game, it's right there on the homepage of Shopify Analytics. Absolutely, yes. The theme bookmark has a gonk character just to match our monthly theme, and people seem to be loving the collectability of it. And somebody raised their hand, I think. Is that right? Oh yes.
Hi, Kath.
Hi. Hello.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, I was just it's a little bit complicated, but I basically got some match funded money through a grant, and I've spent about £4,000 across, which for me is massive.
Yeah.
Is massive. But it's had very little impact, I feel.
Okay.
In terms of direct sales. So this is over a 6-month period. I've spent about £2,000 with a marketing company who were trying to get me some exposure. They got me in kind of Molly Makes and a few wedding magazines.
Yeah.
But nothing that's massively translated to big sales.
Yeah.
And I've also had somebody who's been doing a marketing campaign for me, some social media ads and some Pinterest stuff.
Yeah.
So all this I thought was going to kind of transform my business, and I would directly get money in that I then would be able to carry on those relationships with these guys. But I've now got review meetings with them over the next couple of weeks. And I kind of want to go in with the attitude, rather than thinking this has just not worked for me, this is not going to work for me in the future. I kind of want to go in with the kind of crop attitude, and I just wonder, how can I kind of shift this so I really learn from it? What?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I think for me, what I would be, if I were in your situation, I think I'd want them to be telling me what the green shoots were. Do you see what I mean? And I think you can say to them, look, this was my, you know, we set these goals together. This is what I expected from my investment. This is what actually happened. But you almost want them to be, you want to get the benefit of their knowledge. They should have all the analytics. They should be able to say to you, okay, well, look, we did all of this and we got you into, you know, so for example, the PR, you know, we got you into Molly Makes and the wedding magazines. Okay, so we can see that, you know, of those three, the Molly Makes one was the best. So maybe, you know, potentially what we could try is more crafting. Do you see what I mean? If like none of them, you know, let's say none of them worked at all, you didn't get anything out of anything, then I think you almost have to say to them like, okay, well, what does it take? Like, I think you almost want to put it back on them, that if they were doing something and it didn't work, you want them to explain to you what the green shoots were, you know, what are the potential areas moving forward? What is this telling them? That's really on them to do. And the same with the social media ads. I mean, I think it's really tricky. I talked to a lot of people who do actually struggle with, not everybody, but, you know, a lot of people who work with agencies for paid ads, like they do struggle. It's almost like you know, like I've had someone remember them telling me like they would have a meeting with the Pinterest person would run through all the stats and they'd be like, but we haven't sold anything. Like, you know, it's like, we're not after vanity metrics here. We're after things that actually move the needle, that actually generate sales. So I would say that, you know, if you're in that situation, I would almost put it back on them and just say, look, I need you to explain to me what happened. What did work? Like, what are you seeing that was positive? If it, you know, how does this compare to your other clients? What are your takeaways from it? Get them to, because they can't, I find it, I mean, I find it hard when I hear that agencies are literally almost like, just like, oh, it didn't work. Do you know what I mean? Like, no, they need to give you more. They need to tell you, well, what happened and what would their recommendations be? I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. Can I just check as well? You would expect something like the particularly the paid ads and the Pinterest to be kind of coming to fruition now, wouldn't you? After kind of towards the end of 6 months.
Yes, yeah,
yeah,
sure.
they'd be. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, I appreciate we're over time. If anyone has to go, then this is being recorded, but I'm happy to stick around for another few minutes and just wrap up questions if that's okay. But if you have to jump off, not to worry. Thank you for being here. So I'll get the replay out by the end of the day, as well as the downloadable workbook. Okay, I'm a designer illustrator looking at my sales figures by design. My bestsellers are my cats and dogs collection, but they're not fully aligned with my brand purpose. Oh, what I want to be creating. Oh, I have other collections which sell quite well. Any tips? Oh, this is a tough one. You kind of have to make a decision. There's a phrase like kill my darlings. Like sometimes you have to Sometimes if it's really pulling you off course, then you have to you may have to walk away from them, but acknowledge that will have an impact. I would say if I were you, I would keep the cats and dogs going, but I would set yourself the challenge of what can you produce that is in line with your where you want to take it, your vision, and try and get that, get that out there and try and replace your bestsellers. We should always be looking to replace our bestsellers. Is one of the things big retailers do. As soon as something's selling really well, they're constantly looking at how they can develop the next version of it, because and small businesses tend to go like, oh, this is selling really well, great, let's do loads of it, which is great, but you always need something in the pipeline. So I would set yourself the goal as a challenge, create something that sells better than cats and dogs. Micro influencers in my area, they do work well for me, says Zoe. Okay, so there you go, green shoot, working with loads more micro influencers. Okay, might do lots of people talking about pin badges. I've just been to my first networking event and have set a goal to attend to a month. Fantastic. Definitely a good thing to commit to when you find the right one. Yes, in-person networking, it can work super well. To be honest, it's something again to try, something different. I've been working hard on growing my email list. Every time I email the list, people unsubscribe. Is this normal? Yes, I think this is normal. Some people, I've unsubscribed from things that I really like the people and what they're doing, but it's just no longer relevant for me, for example. I've also go through phases where I unsubscribe to everything just because I end up realizing I'm spending all my time editing my inbox. This is normal. When people unsubscribe from the email, we say, thank you for unsubscribing from my email. Because ultimately, if they're not going to buy from you, they can, in the nicest possible way, get off your email list, because email subscribers cost you money. They cost you money. And so therefore, if they're going to sit there and not buy from you, then I would rather that they unsubscribe than just delete my emails. It's healthy, it's helpful, it's and I definitely don't look who's unsubscribed. Some people go through that and they're like, oh, well, so-and-so unsubscribed. I have dear friends I've unsubscribed from their email list just because I was like, you know what, actually I don't need to see their emails, so don't worry about it. I think that's normal. Just, yeah, and if they're not interested, then thank you for unsubscribing, it's very helpful. Yes, Dominique saying it's normal, get half my orders from emails, so it's worth keeping going. Yes, Helen, if half your orders come from emails, that's brilliant. Lots of people saying that they get unsubscribes. 1 email weekly, yes, I definitely recommend that. And then club members, we have got our introduction to email marketing course in the club as well, if you're not sure what to do with your email marketing. But yes, in a nutshell, I do recommend once a week. A good challenge, says Ellie. Yes, absolutely. And also just, always, if cats and dogs are completely not in where you want to be, then it's hard to amend it. But, other ways of doing cats and dogs that do fit with your values, or is it just you want a different direction, in which case, keep going, keep moving it forward. Lovely. People sharing socials, go for it. Yes. We also have the issue of what customers want versus what we want to create, and have come up with a one for them, one for us strategy. Love this, Joe. It just means we get to flex our creative juices on design that are more fun, while still making the more generic designs that sell well, but are, in our view, less fun to design. Yeah, absolutely. Again, I know I keep talking about 80-20, but that is another way that the 80-20 manifests itself. A big retailer, what pays the bills for a fashion brand is probably black trousers. Most places that I worked that sold clothing, black trousers were the cash cow for the business. That's what everyone bought. But you don't put the black trousers in the window, and you don't feature them in your PR campaigns. So you definitely 100% can create the things, and you also want to be creating these things that move the brand forward, because if you only ever created black trousers and never created anything else, you'd never get any insight into what's moving it forward. So I love that one for you, one for us strategy. So if you're creating stuff, and then you can learn from it. Sometimes the customer's going to react really well, and be really super positive, and now you've got a new creative direction for the business, which is brilliant. I look at unsubscribes as niching down, says Ellie. Perfect. Yes, Sally is saying, when I set my business up, opened 9 years ago tomorrow. Congratulations, Sally. I really wanted it to be an all-round stationery shop, and over the years I built up a huge range of pens and notebooks, but I realised the children's stationery was more popular, pivoted to that, and have spent the last 18 months clearing the old ranges. Catherine's book, Tame Your Tiger, is really helping me tackle this problem. Excellent. My point is, even though lovely stationery is my passion, the customers didn't want it, and I had to change our focus to where the money is. Yeah, I mean, it's called the art and often it's called the art and science of retail. And it's quite funny because Mary Portas talks about this quite a lot, and she's talked about it quite a lot about, I don't know if anyone saw, she wrote this open letter to the John Lewis management. You know, her thing was, well, actually, you know, you can't do it all by the numbers. Sometimes you do have to have that creative spark, and I think you have to find the balance, you know, so you do have to focus it where what the customer wants and what they ask for, but you can still have some for yourself as well. Lovely. Okay. Amazing. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Really fabulous to have you with us. As I said, I will be sending out the replay and the handout by the end of the day. So thanks again for coming. Club members, again, the replay will be sent, will be put into the portal, but I will email when that's done. Everyone else, I will send it round as a link. And then anybody who came today as well, we're going to send you the opportunity to join the club for your first month for free. So wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody. Keep an eye out for those emails. Thanks for being here, and I will see you all in the group or on Instagram. Bye.